Welcome to Chai with Ping. This is Ping Robert. In this podcast, I cover immigrant stories, cross-cultural experiences, and minority issues. Join me with a cup of chai and take a listen. You ready?
Got it.
No questions?
I'm good. I'm ready to go.
All right, let me do the intro. Welcome back to Chai with Ping. My name is Ping Robert, and thank you so much for tuning in my show. If you're a newcomer, new listener, thank you for being here. It's definitely going to be a great, I personally think it's going to be a great show. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for being here with us. And your support, your listening is always a great motivation for me to do this work. Today, before we start with our topic with African descent musician, we're going to talk about how you can support this channel a little bit. So you can hit that subscribe button and follow us on whatever app that you listen to your podcast from, and that will give you the notification whenever we have a new release. Usually it's every other Monday. So bi-weekly, we'll release it in the US time, which is in the morning, and then in Asian time is in the evening. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. So I would love to hear from you. If you have any feedback or any encouragement that you want to write, you can write on Apple Podcasts or just hit that 5-star button on Spotify. All right, enough of that. Today we have a returning guest. He's going to talk about how he became a musician and then just involved with multilingual, multicultural component. And he was formerly known as Mel and is a Afro-Reggaetton and R&B artist based in Toronto. And he was born in Cameroon and raised in other 6 countries. So if you haven't already, I put the notes in the episode notes about his first episode. So feel free to listen to his first story. And then his music embodies this lived experience of the third culture kid. Let's welcome MARC AMELLO.
Hey, Ping. Thanks for having me again. I'm so excited to be back.
I know. I love your stories last time. I really had fun with you.
Hey. Honestly, I had so much fun, and like it was really natural. The time went by so quickly. So
I
really
know. Happy. I think you're a natural storyteller, and then you're just full of stories in your life.
Yeah, I'd say like I'm lucky enough to have lived an interesting life so far.
Yeah.
Hopefully more stories to come.
Yeah, like as you move 6 countries, don't you feel any stress or like fear of getting to a new place?
It started to become the type of thing that I actually started looking forward to, and I feel like it probably affects me in daily life as well, because like I always want to meet new people, like try new adventures and like see different things, and sometimes it's hard to be content being in the same place for too long.
Oh, okay. So how long is that spend for you to like you want to get moving and to see some new places?
It used to be like every 4 years.
Oh, okay.
Or 3-4 years. But recently in Toronto, I've been a lot more settled down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you foresee yourself moving to another place soon?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. Where would that be?
Probably in Europe for a bit. Like there's a lot of cities in Europe that interest me. So I really want to live there for a longer extended period.
Yeah. Maybe you should move to all 5 different continents, right? You already conquered Africa, and then now you're in North America, and then you were in Europe, in Spain for some time. Yeah. You know, Asia, Australia.
Yeah, I definitely want to go to Asia, Latin America, like Brazil. Yes. Brazil is definitely on the cards at some point.
Yeah, especially their music is like such a unique tune and beats and all that. So it's like, it will be so fun to see how you do music in different places of the world.
Honestly, I would just soak up the experience and like let it seep into the music. It would be great.
Yeah. Hopefully this episode can kind of reach out to some of the listeners. If they're also in the music industry, they can hook you up, right? Like maybe welcome you to their countries and all.
Oh, of course. And even if I don't, I'll jump into it like blindly. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm down to experience the culture.
Yeah. Do you think that you're a brave, courageous person? Because like you can jump blindly into a new place, huh?
Yeah, I would say like there's a part of me that's definitely like a more shy person, but then that person disappears in like 5 seconds of getting used to a place. So like once I get comfortable, then I'm all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's go here, let's go there, let's go everywhere. I'm not really too worried about anything.
Wait, being a third culture kid, okay, the listeners might not know what third culture kid is. How do you define you as a third culture kid?
So typically, I would say a third culture kid is someone who has grown up in multiple cities or countries and generally struggles to find a specific place that they would call home because they've just been used to like living everywhere and being exposed to different cultures. And naturally, those people don't have like one specific culture that they identify with because like they're where they're from, where their family's from, where they lived. It starts to seep into like what their identity is and start to form a third identity that is just other from what is typical to a usual human being, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. And also, some people might identify as a third culture kid or TCK if they go to an international school. So, which is a different system in that hosting country, or they grew up in a culture which are different from their parents.
Yeah.
For example, yeah. So, for example, some kids were born in Taiwan. Like, for example, my friends, some of them they're born in Taiwan, but they grew up in the U.S., but their parents are from Taiwan. So then that's also a little cross-cultural bit of that thing. Some people call them cross-cultural kids. Some people call them third culture kids. So I will put some of the episodes on my channel to about third culture kids in the episode note. If you're interested, you can definitely listen to it. All right, Mark. So we talk about your background, moving around and growing up in a more of a French and English medium educational system, right?
Yeah.
And what are some of the important identities for you?
I would say that I always see myself as like first and foremost Cameroonian. I was really lucky the fact that like most of my family are from the same place. My parents from the same place, and they always reinforced the identity of where we were from and being Cameroonian as a thing. So I never really struggled with thinking like, oh, what country am I from? Like, where is my home nation? Because at the root of it, I always remember that first and foremost, I'm Cameroonian. And then beyond that, I would say multilingual. The French really speaking French as a kid always was an advantage to me in terms of whether it's communicating with people at school, outside of school, navigating, getting like jobs and stuff. Even applying to schools was always an advantage that I could speak another language on top of English, right? So I always kept that close to me. And also being a Catholic was also as a kid really shaped the type of person that I am, particularly going to a Jesuit school and being exposed to the idea of being a missionary, a man for others that's like meant to be serving other people. Even when you're chasing your own goals, remember that first and foremost, like till you live to serve others as well.
Do you perceive yourself as an immigrant in Toronto?
Oh, 100%. Actually, in Toronto, I'd say I don't feel so much as an immigrant
Okay.
because it's just a city full of immigrants. So there's no
Mm,
really, I don't feel anyone really feels like they're in, I guess, Canada per se when you're in Toronto because like you're exposed to so many different cultures and your weekends you can go out to a club that's like straight African club and I feel like I'm back home. It's like I didn't miss a beat, honestly. And yeah, I'd say in Toronto I don't feel other. I would say when I was in the US I felt like an immigrant. Um, in Europe I probably felt like an immigrant for sure because there's not many people who look like me.
that is so
But
interesting because, like, I thought about Toronto. I've been there and I've seen a lot. Yeah, yeah, just like you said, you can always find the community that you belong. And there are like so many Asians, Indians, South Asians, and all that. And yeah, there were Black people. So but like in the US, you felt like more of an immigrant. Was it because you couldn't find your group?
I would say it's more so I feel like there was, especially because I was in high school at the time,
Mm,
it's a feeling of being different necessarily because like most of the people I went to high school with either grew up in the US or had gone to American schools their entire life. American culture was like all they knew. They knew very little about like even Canada, or that a country that's right beside them. So it was always a thing of like I had to explain to people what certain things meant, or the fact that we don't live in teepees in Africa, we don't live in igloos in Canada, so things like that. So that was the only place where I really felt like an immigrant. Also because the accent in DC was so strong when I first moved there. So maybe for like the first 2 months, people were speaking, it felt like 100 miles an hour. And I was always like hearing the sentence maybe like a minute later, like, oh, that's what you meant.
because right now, I wouldn't. think that you have a much different accent. But then it's like in DC, their accent is making it difficult for you to understand.
Oh yeah. Also, it took a while to adjust, but
Yeah.
when I first had moved from Toronto, like the DC accent sounded like a completely different language than English for like the first month and a half. I was like, what is going on here? Like
Yeah.
no one is speaking English right now.
Was there an example? Because I'm not sure if I know a lot of differences in the West Coast. Is it like car? So when we say car and then they say car?
I would say it's more saying sentences really fast, like
Oh, okay.
really, really fast, that so much so that the words just like blend into each other. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
wait, what did you just say?
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. And especially that you're going there for school. Are you, so were your classmates or schoolmates usually American?
So my school was like half boarding school and half
Mm-hmm.
like day students. So there was actually a lot of immigrants like me that were from like Switzerland, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, but like I'd say we made up like 20% of the school. And the other like people who had been immigrants were like probably second generation and had grown up in DC or the DMV area. So they grew up in American culture. It wasn't that different to us. So it was like I'd say a small group of us, probably 15 to 20% of the school that were immigrants, and the rest were like straight up Americans.
One last question before we jump into the music part is like,
Yeah.
what kind of school did you go before high school? Was it an international school, British school, or
It was just
like a local?
so the Catholic school system in Canada is actually public schools.
Mhm.
So I went to a public Catholic school in Toronto before that.
Oh, I didn't know that Catholic school can be public schools.
In Canada, yeah.
Yeah, that is so cool. We're gonna shift a little bit to the music making industry, right? Your experience. How did you start making music?
So I'd say the very first introduction was when I was like 6 years old. My brothers were producers and they were working with this artist in Kenya named Black Kent. And he was actually the first person I ever seen like mix languages and try like putting English and French together. So from like very early, that was already in my head as something that was possible to do, even though it wasn't necessarily like, I guess, celebrated globally, but it was possible to do. And also see people like Christina Aguilera and who was it? Mainly her making songs in Spanish and English as well. So like from an early age, I saw that was something that was very possible, right? And then they would let me record from time to time on their tracks. When I was like 6 years old, I would say like really dumb rhymes, but they would literally record it, and they would get really hyped whenever I would record. They would play it like on the radio station in Cameroon sometimes. So it was just like it was a early like exposure to what music can be like from a just like expressing creativity standpoint when I was really really young.
Yeah. So did you have any connection to the radio or like who were the people recorded for you?
So, like I said, my brothers were producers. The artist they were working with actually is now like one of the heads in Warner in Africa.
Got
And
it.
I had cousins in my village in Cameroon that ran the radio station. So like on times when like maybe late at night when no one else was listening, they would just like run our music just for
Uh,
fun, just to, it was just one of those things.
yeah,
Everyone's like, ah, that's you.
yeah. When nobody was listening, like everyone was sleeping, they
Well,
put
not
your
necessarily
music
nobody
on.
was listening, but like at times when they got the chance to just play whatever they wanted to, they would
Yeah.
do that.
That is so cool. And then at that time, what kind of music style did you do?
Oh, I wouldn't even consider it a style, but I was listening to a lot of like I was copying Eminem at the time. So I was
Oh,
just
so
like
a lot of
making a lot of
rap.
really it was
You,
rap. I was
yeah.
rapping, but like it was really gimmicky and what you'd expect a 6-year old to rap about.
I don't know, milk and candy.
It was just really stupid things. I
Oh,
could even
wow.
but I had fun doing it and it exposed me to like the structure of like formulating a verse or something like that,
Mm.
from a really early age.
Yeah, and then from what you shared is just it runs in the family because of brother and cousin, they have that experience, so they kind of let you in a little, and then you get that exposure very early on.
Yeah. And then I also had a cousin later on when I was around 10 or 11 who
Mm.
had taught himself how to sing by listening to like popular compilation albums like Westlife albums and Backstreet Boy albums.
Oh
And
yeah.
whenever I would visit in the summer, I would stay with him for a long time.
Yeah.
So he would play, there was this one compilation album of Westlife, and I would hear it over and over again, to the point that I started trying to sing all the songs, singing along, like matching the key of how the people were singing. That was really the first way I learned how to sing properly, right? It was that, and then like Alicia Keys albums and stuff like that. So being exposed to that from my cousins just taught me like, oh, there's so many different genres of music, and all of them have like fundamentally interesting and good songs that if I study long enough, I can replicate how the person is singing it.
So you already mentioned Christina Aguilera, Alicia Keys, Eminem's, and like these are the artists that inspire you. Did you have like a role model that who you would like to be? And how do you make that connection? Is it because their music style or their songs, their ethnicity or language?
So when I was really young, there was two artists in particular. One was Tupac, who had already passed away by the time I was a kid, right? And for me, it was because there was a lot of poetry and messaging in his music that always connected to me. Like I'll listen to a song Changes, I'll run it back over and over and over and over again, just listening to every single verse. And I was like, wow, this guy literally just told a massive story through like 3 minutes. And I feel like I connect to it every single time I hear it. And then there was an artist from Ivory Coast. His name was Duke Saga. He also passed away when I was pretty young. And he made Coupé-Décalé music, which was like my favorite genre as a kid, probably till I was like maybe 12, 13. I would listen to Coupé-Décalé and like Ivorian music probably 75% of the time I listen to music. And it definitely still, you can still hear it even in my music today. Like that's where the Afro beats side of me has come from, to be honest. That's where it derived from.
I've never heard them.
Oh, it's a whole new world.
It's gonna blow my mind.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
And then I would say later on, moving to Toronto, Drake obviously became a massive influence on me. And I think the thing that we probably have in common the most is the exploration of like different sounds and genres and cultures, and that seeping into the type of music we make. So I'd say he was a massive influence on me as well.
And then, so, you know, you went on to elementary school, middle school, high school, and college.
Yeah.
And then you didn't study music for your major, but then how did you choose that path?
So at the time in high school, I would write for people, and people were always like, oh, you're pretty good at this. Like, you should probably like take more time on it. And I was like, whatever. At the time I was more focused on sports. So it wasn't something I was thinking about. And when I went to university, I ran into a group of friends who also like whenever they had fun, like they'll just make music on the side. We just have fun with it. And funnily enough, like in those circles, there was A&Rs of different artists, people who were producing for like major artists at the time. But like, I just had no idea. They were just people I went to school with. I didn't pay attention to it. But when they would listen to like the type of demos I would make just for fun, they'd be like, yo, this is actually pretty good. Like, honestly, I'm not just saying that because like you should probably try and pursue this a little more. And it wasn't until I really just put my foot out there and just like released a song and got the feedback in return from it that I was like, oh, this is something I'm really good at.
When was the first time that you first released your music or album?
So there was 2 times. When I was in high school, it was like a joke song, me and my friends. There was a studio at my high school, so we used to like pop in and record or help people record. And one day I just decided, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna lay a hook and a verse and we're gonna release a song. And it was called Pink Dress. It's an awful song. I would never recommend anyone to listen to it.
Is it still on YouTube or
I think it's on
apps?
SoundCloud somewhere, but it would be very hard for anyone to find it.
Pink Dress?
Thankfully, so honestly, it would be so hard for anyone to find it. But it was just something that like I felt like, oh, even though this isn't the greatest song, like the elements of it are there, you know, like you can clearly tell that these are people who like, if they worked hard on it, would have a talent for this. But I put that aside, didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
And then in 2018, my roommate at the time had a studio in our house. So like whenever I would come back from work, I would just like literally for like in like 3 hours, I'd make like a little EP, 4 songs every single day of the week for like maybe 3-4 months. until there was a song in there that I'd always play for people, and they're like always like, yo, this is a really good song. So that ended up being the first song I released. It was called Back Up. And I got an engineer here in Toronto. His name is Five Piece. He mixed it. And I'll just like put it out there, see whatever happened. And luckily enough, when I put it out, one of my main producers now, my friend Moaz, his photographer at the time saw the song and was like, yo, oh, you two should work together. And from there, like literally the next week we met up and worked. We've been working on music ever since that day, to be honest,
That is
nonstop.
so cool.
And that
Yeah.
photographer is also still does photography for me, but
Yeah.
it's photography for like major artists here in Toronto as well.
Wow. And so when you met these people and then start making music more seriously, were you in college or after college?
I had just finished college and I had just come back from Spain actually. And I was still working with my startup company.
Yeah.
Still doing that. But it was just something I did when I had the time, you know?
Yeah. What did you study in college?
International relations and statistics.
Okay. And then you later work at a tech company?
While I was in university, me
Yeah.
and my friends started a company that is still going as well.
And so that's very different from music making.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you have did you think about that? Like, because I think a lot of people might be scared because like music in the beginning, musicians might not make a lot of revenue. And then you also work in the startup company before, so you could see that business world and all that. And so how did you have the courage to make that transition to leave your majors and your work experience and jump into music industry?
I think the thing was just to do both.
Okay.
That was the solution. Yeah. And then to see at what point I could establish myself to a degree that like people in the music industry would take me seriously and it wouldn't be like something that's seen as a risk anymore because the feedback was there, the support was there. So it was just one of those things where like I've always been the type of person, like whenever I do something, I try to do it at the highest level. So like when I was a kid, I was playing soccer, I was playing in the National League. When I was doing the tech company, like we went internationally. So it was one of those things that when I'm committed to something, like I really obsess about it. And my engineer, he's here behind me, he will tell you like, I could listen to a song 3,000 times in a row and never get tired of it, but just because like I just love music that much and I just listen to music nonstop. That's just something that like, it's not a chore for me to listen to any song. Even if it's a bad song, I'll listen to it. And like, even if any person reaches out to me and tells me, yo, listen to this song of mine, I'll listen to it because like, it doesn't take more than 2 to 3 minutes to listen to a song. And to me, that's not that much time to like dedicate to giving someone your ear or something like that, you know? So I've always been the type of person, I'm obsessed with music. I'm obsessed with what I do. And I just go for it.
I can definitely not listen to a song for 3,000 times, maybe twice a day. It's like I cannot hit a song on repeat. I always need that variety in a combination form. So I love radio because they keep playing different things. But wait, so you're saying that you have obsession of music, which is like, it's great for musicians like you. But then when you hear something not so great, like, do you give them the honest feedback or you kind of just like appreciate what they did?
Sometimes it depends on the relationship, but if I'm giving feedback, it'll be constructive. So it won't be like, oh, this sucks, this is terrible. It'll be like, oh, maybe if you change this, I think it would be interesting. Or if you tried this type of production, that might fit you more. Or, you know, things like that, because I never want to be the person to just be like, yo, this is terrible, this sucks, like never do music again, because I think we would have missed out on so many generational talents if they had just been told like, yo, you suck, like don't ever try to make music again, because everyone at the starting section is not good. Even if you think you're good, I'm sorry, like at the beginning, no one is actually really good at it. It's very rare, maybe like 1 in a million, 1 in a trillion, maybe people who make music for the first time will be good. Like there's always a starting point and there's always an ability to improve. Because even myself, I listen to things I made 3 years ago versus what I'm doing today. It's like night and day. And if I hadn't been given the early encouragement by people to keep going, I wouldn't have gotten the chance to improve.
You sound like a great mentor for somebody.
Yeah, I do. I'd say
Are you getting
I'm joking.
shy?
I'm joking. I would say like, yeah, I'm the type of person who's like, a lot of people can reach out to me, and I'm always gonna support anyone's music, because even like sometimes people like don't want to post someone's song that they know, because like, oh,
Yeah.
what are people gonna think? Oh my god, you're posting this person. Like to me,
Mm,
it's like, yo, people don't care that much. Like it's up there for 24 hours. The person appreciates your support, and if you like it, you like it. Like there's no point of thinking like, oh, what are other people gonna think of me for supporting another person? Like
mm.
honestly, no one is gonna look at you badly for supporting someone.
Yeah, because I do think you have a great positivity and your attitude towards people's work and sweat and effort is very, very good. Do you have a mentor ever?
Yeah, I would say I have a lot of mentors. I'm luckily in the music industry.
Yeah.
When I first started my startup company, one of my mentors was working at EY, but he had been like an award-winning musician in R&B and gospel in the UK before he transitioned over to working at EY, like award-winning, and he would always give me advice on terms of like navigating the industry, how to go about improving, how to go about getting feedback and not being discouraged. So I would say that's Christopher Gordon, great guy. So shout out to him for sure. I would say my engineer that I work with is a great person for in terms of like feedback and like nitpicking, and he knows that like
Mm,
he's a very blunt person and he knows that I can take it. Like
yeah.
I grew up with a lot of like tough coaches, so
Yes.
there's nothing anyone can really tell me that will get me like despair or nothing,
Frustrated.
because
Yeah.
I've literally I've had coaches who are absolutely ruthless, right? So once you
Yeah.
can survive those type of experiences, I feel like you can take feedback from anyone, no matter how harsh it is. And I'm also
Yeah.
lucky because there's a lot of people who start music and you get like a lot of negative comments on Instagram and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't, I'll say I probably experienced maybe 2 negative comments in all the
Mm-hmm.
time I made music, which is
Wow.
like, one of them was definitely bad. One of the guy was like, "Yo, I wish I could run into a sword after listening to that song." I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's not nice." But funnily enough, he started an app, and his app blew up one of my songs. So I guess it worked out in the end. But
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, I'd
Wow.
say I'm lucky
That's
that I haven't had too much like negative feedback in general too. So that's
yeah.
probably helped shape the fact that I'm very positive,
Got
because
it.
I could imagine a world where if every day all I'm getting is negative feedback, I'd be a
Mm-hmm.
completely different person, right?
Yeah. And then wow, that's just very creative to say hateful words like that.
Yeah, but also we have to think about like, what is your goal in saying that to a person, right? Are you trying to
Yeah.
make yourself feel better, or are you trying to critique? Because
Mm,
there's ways to critique, and there's ways to like, there's bullying and then there's critiquing, right? And
that's right.
constructive criticism is always welcome, but
Mm-hmm.
if you're not saying anything that has a potential to improve somebody, then
Then it's just
I
hateful
find there's no
speech.
real point of saying it,
That's right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. That makes sense. So when you decide to go to pursue music full time, how did your family or community respond to your choice?
I would say I'm still in a place where I'm like juggling both, like definitely 90% of time to music, but whenever I'm needed with the company, I'm there. But I would say like, because I've made my music at a high level, it's at a point where like people can see that I'm not someone who is, maybe I don't know how to say this, but who's gonna fall through the cracks in music, if that makes sense, because like I'm constantly improving, and the people that I'm getting introduced to, the doors that I'm crossing through, it shows that like the trajectory has always been upward. It hasn't really hit a, how do you explain it? It hasn't really nosedived into like a divot or
Yeah, or
nothing.
go
Yeah,
down. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Got
also,
it.
I also think the fact that like the type of music I make is not really full of profanity,
Mm-hmm.
and hasn't really, and still reflects upon the type of person I am, makes people more capable of supporting what I do, versus like if I was making a type of music that was like completely negative, that was full of like crazy profanity, that made my family, the people where I come from, listen to it and be like, wow, I can't be proud of this person. Like, who is this person I'm listening to, right? So I always keep that in mind when I'm making a song. Like, yo, my mom is gonna hear this song. I can't be talking all type of crazy way. And that's the thing I love the most, is that like when I do shows, like a 60-year-old person will come to me and be like, oh, I really enjoyed this song. same way that a 14-year-old person can come up to me like, oh, I really enjoyed this song. So like that's really the goal, to make a music that's still that I can be proud of and that can represent the type of person that I am.
So you mentioned that you're making songs that you always think about, okay, your parents are gonna listen to it, and then you try to keep it under control in a way, right? But then I have a question to that. It's like, do you feel that you're fully being yourself when
100%.
yeah?
Oh, sorry. I would say 100% because luckily enough, I've also found this by working with other artists as well, is that like when people get into like oh, I'm gonna do this to you, in the music, and like it's full of profanity and stuff, more times than not, that's not who they are. It's who they think is cool to the public. So luckily enough, like I have that compass in my head that like, yo, be yourself, like you're not the type of person who's like, F you, I'm gonna do this to you, whatever. That's not the type of person that I am. Like, I'm a positive person. I love like music that makes people feel happy. I love melodies, and I love like writing challenges. In high school, my biggest strength was like my writing. I always improved on the writing. I think it's always a challenge to write without being ridiculously explicit, ridiculously vulgar. It's more of a challenge to me from a writing perspective.
Yeah.
I find that way more enjoyable to sit there and like, oh, what is the perfect word that fits this moment, instead of saying F you, what is the perfect way to phrase this that is really creative, that is not like not necessarily the first thing you would do right away. It's something I have to revise.
Yes.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So you kind of focus more on the beauty of the language as well. And
that's another thing. I love languages.
Yeah. You already touched upon a little bit, you value the beauty of writing. And so how do your identities, you already mentioned that you're Cameroonian, bilingual, Catholic, you want to serve people. How do these identities shape the way that you create your music work?
I would say the place in which you see my identities the most is in the production of the sounds of the music. So most of the time I'm blending Afrobeats inspired drums, like the classic, the bongos, all those type of like traditional African sounds with Latin infused, reggaeton sounds or flamenco or whatever it is, as well as hip hop and R&B. So it's just like picking in from like, yo, when I lived in Kenya, this artist, when I lived in Cameroon, when I lived in Senegal, who I listened to, oh, these sounds were present in their music. When I go to Spain, what am I hearing? Oh, I love those drums. I love how they did that. I love how the melody was constructed, adding that. And then the American influence of hip hop and R&B as well. So all of that gets encapsulated mostly probably in the production of the music. And lucky for me as well, my engineer is the type of person who grew up around the world as well. So he has a similar experience of like the sounds that he grew up around blending into the music. So it was just a natural chemistry that worked out perfectly for me.
I have a question. Like, do you guys use fusion in your word of describing your kind of music, or you prefer to use blending?
Either or. I'll say it's a fusion between Afrobeats and reggaeton and R&B. It's the perfect middle. Even right now, we're working on a song, and I was like, damn, I'm trying to find a reference track for this song, but there really isn't one because it's such a blend of songs. It fits right in the middle between dancehall, R&B, reggaeton, and Afrobeats, and there's really not many songs like that out there.
Yeah. I think one of the thing about interviewing you is so easy is because you kind of just connect through that we already go to the next question without me emphasizing it. But so my next question is like, what are some advantage of your background and yourself, in the music industry? You already mentioned that you can do a great fusion of different elements. Is there anything else?
I would say like I really learned about this probably through the pandemic, because I was having a big issue like with writer's block and things to talk about. But at the time I was thinking too much about like writing in English, right? But I found through tapping into different languages, I could express different emotions, right? I feel like, I don't know if you have the same thing, but when I speak a different language, your personality alters a little bit in every language you speak, because
Absolutely.
sometimes your comfortability, sometimes just like how the languages flows.
Yes.
So I found that it's like a unique advantage that like I can draw out different aspects of my personality by changing languages.
Yeah. Wait, so give us some examples. How do you think it's different when you're in English, French, and Spanish?
I would say in Spanish, my natural melodies come out more. For
Okay.
some reason, I find like the phonetic sounds that are found in Spanish
Mm-hmm.
lend more naturally to my voice, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like I sing more loosely and naturally in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
In French, I feel like I tap in more into my introspective, like the introspective aspect of my music. So I feel a lot
Mm.
more like I feel French is a lot more of a philosophical language. When you go to school in French, it's very much about literature,
Yes.
philosophers, like
Yeah.
all you're doing is studying that type of thing. So it's a very introspective language. It
Yes.
forces you to like develop a perspective of the world for yourself, if that makes sense. So if you notice, if you
Wow.
meet a lot of French people, like they'll be very what's the word? Not argumentative, but they're very expressive, and they know like
Yeah. They elaborate on their thoughts.
exactly.
Yeah.
They've really thought things through to a degree. And I would say in
Huh.
English, I tap in more into Afro beats and the natural like vibes and
Yeah, 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 yeah.
melodies and flows that come with
Yeah.
Afro beats. Yeah.
English brings you more of the tempo and beats, but then
Yeah.
Spanish, it flows through easier with your mouth.
I'll say melody. Yeah, melody flows easily
Yeah.
for me in Spanish. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna dig into your work and listen to differences that because you have
yeah,
made different songs with different languages.
yeah. I'll say people are gonna hear more of my Spanish songs this year, and they'll understand what I'm talking about, because
Okay.
I would say I push my melodies to a different level when I jumped fully into trying that.
Yeah. What are the so name maybe two songs that you would recommend listeners to first dip into your work?
Yeah, so I would say Million,
Mhm.
which is me and a producer out in Seattle actually,
Yeah.
Lace Cadence, amazing guy
Mm.
who puts on like artists throughout the world. Like we met a year ago, and like we've developed a relationship whereby he's a mentor to me as well,
Mhm.
and various up and coming artists as well would say the same about him. Amazing person. So I'll say Million, where you'd probably get exposed to my Afrobeat side, and again, the flow, the drum and the rhythms of Afro beats. And then I would say my most recent song that I dropped called No Remontada, which is my first Spanish song that I released. And that one is more melody, emotion, the reggaeton mixed with a little bit of Afro beats, but really the typical reggaeton sound, that blasts out melodic inspirations, things like that. And it was a song that came very naturally to me. So I'd say those two I'd recommend the most.
Awesome. So we talk about advantages or some of the cool or strength that
Yeah.
you had in making music. What are the challenges?
I would say one of the challenges that people maybe don't think about is when you try to make a sound that is new, people within the industry don't necessarily know where to place you, if that makes sense. So I would say the music industry has shifted towards a place where it's more playlist driven, and playlists are typically going to fit a particular type of sound. So if you make a sound that's like in between those sounds, sometimes it's harder to crack into the major playlist infrastructure, which is something I've found. So like I would say it's forced me to like maybe use more elements of the common um sound in a particular genre while still infusing what I do, but like making sure that the elements are still there so that a listener who's used to that genre can still feel like they're listening to the same genre, but like having a new spice added to it. So that's something I've had to overcome, is for sure. And I'd also say like initially speaking so many language, as much as it's a strength, it can be hard for people to understand like what your voice is, what certain people won't always be able to understand your lyrics, and just find the ability to constantly relate with you if you're so diverse. So that's something I've
Mm,
had to overcome for sure.
yeah, I think it's just like, one thing that two sides, that one way that you're multilingual and multicultural, but the other side is like there are only certain groups of listeners might relate to all of your works. Otherwise, some of them might only relate to English or Spanish or French. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah, and the way I found to like try to bridge that gap is just to improve on like my melodic performance on the songs to a degree that people won't even think about what language it's in, right?
Yeah.
Because I would say like Bad Bunny was a reggaeton artist. He just had the #1 album in America on a fully Spanish album, you know? And most of the people who listen to his music don't know a word he's saying, but they feel it. They feel every single word. They don't even know what the song is about. So I think that's something that, and someone who I look to really push what I'm doing and take my music to another level.
You know, even in podcasting industries, it's like we're looking for a niche, and then everyone kind of needs a label for our lives or our identities. But in your life, your work, there is so many intersectionalities, and so it doesn't fit any of the conventional boxes. And then I think that that's also beauty of it.
Yeah, I would say like the way I fit into niches, I realize I really have two niches, which is the Afrobeats and the reggaeton.
Yeah.
And when I make individual songs, maybe I try to stick within the genre on those songs, but still add the other elements of the other culture from like production standpoint. But make sure that like song by song, you can feel the particular genre in each song versus trying to always do too much on one song and do everything on a single song, if that makes sense.
Do you hope that your listeners will keep an open mind when they listen to your work?
100%. I also think that like I've kind of forced them to from the beginning, because the different languages, it was from like song 2. Like I was trying to make sure people know that like, hey, if you listen to me, I'm someone who's going to try different things. I'm going to try different sounds. And like, I also feel like my advantage is that like, I'm in a generation where the world and like the world on the internet is so blurred that people have access to so much different type of music. I have my friends in Canada. I expose them to French drill, and now they love French drill. They don't speak French, but they love the sounds of that. You can go to a club here, a top 40 club in Canada. They'll play Spanish music. So I'm lucky to be in a generation where the line between genre, culture, and all of that is being blurred, and people have become a lot more accepting of it. So I'd say that's luck.
Yeah. What do you hope to make in the future? Like, are you trying to blend more cultures, more languages?
There's a side of me that eventually wants to try like Brazilian samba music or something, or funk at some point. But I also have like a lot of songs I've recorded that just don't fit the type of genres I'm working on now. But like 3-4 years down the road would fit where I'll be, if that makes sense. So there's like different versions of R&B that I want to try. Well, that I've already like recorded, but like I want to expose to the public eventually. But for now, I'm definitely focusing on Afrobeats, reggaeton, and really making a name for myself in that space before I can expose people to the other side of me and the other genres that I'm capable of producing. And also, I'll use writing for other people as an outlet for some of the things that I can't release myself right now.
I look forward to your work. It sounds really exciting. I guess there could be some listeners who are amateur or part-time musicians. Is there any encouragement or constructive feedback that you would like to give to them?
100%. I would say first and foremost, YouTube is your friend. You can find out how to do a lot of things as a musician today on the internet. You can Google like the proper way to record. You can Google how to start producing. You can Google how to create a melody. You can Google all of these things now. And that information is so accessible to you that you shouldn't be afraid to experiment with what you find out on the internet right now today. And secondly, I'd say just keep going. To be honest, like you're not going to sound great the first time you make a song, but like anything in life, it's about 10,000 hours and constant iteration until you become the artist that you want to be. So I would say, yeah, keep going.
And you mentioned before earlier in this interview that you said that, you didn't make music as a full-time thing until you really are sure that it can be like a no risk thing for you. Would you also say these to the musicians?
Yeah, I would say like it's something that like you can take 1 or 2 hours a day, you know, a time where you would be idle to work on music or work on improving music. Or even there's ways to work on music without actually working on music. So when you're working out, say listening to a particular album because you want to learn how a particular artist approaches songwriting or production. So there's ways to, luckily music is something that we can do while we're doing other things, right? You can be running, listening to music, you can play a sport, you can be meditating, you can be doing
driving.
You do exactly. You can be doing all types of things where you're like taking information, even subconsciously, about how to improve your creation process.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. It's so cool to see a musician encouraging other musicians. And then it's like, I almost felt like your eyes are full of lights and then just kind of light up. And before we talk about your social media, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I would say first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. Like, it's been a real blast. I love the questions that you asked and that you're really inquisitive about, you know, my story. And generally, it means so much to me to have a platform to be able to, you know, express my thoughts and share my music with people as well. So I really just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Are you open for other interviews, for like going to other shows and all that? How can they reach out to you?
100%. I'm at MARC AMELLO, MARC AMELLO on Instagram, and marc.amello on TikTok, and Marc AMELLO on every major streaming platform.
Yeah.
So if you want to reach out to me. I'll always respond, and I'm always happy to talk to anyone.
Absolutely. And listeners, I will put all the information that Marc just talked about in the episode notes, so you can find the handles over there and then give him a shout out. You know, after you listen to this episode, maybe you learned something, share with us, put it on your story, on a post, and then tag us. We would love to hear from you. All right, Marc, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Chai with Ping. If you think someone will benefit from this episode, don't forget to share it with them. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you like my show, you can buy me some chai with small donations. Details are in the episode notes. Till next time.